Okay, it's 2:05. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. We have a nice crowd today, so thank you for joining us. Remember, if you just got here, you can put your questions as we go into the chat. I'll try to answer them as we go. I appreciate your questions because sometimes I'll forget something and your questions will help me to get that information out. So today we're going to talk about planting tips and tricks for young fruit trees. So welcome to Tropical Fruit Tuesdays. And this is a shameless plug. We'll be doing this just about every 2 weeks until I run out of information in my head to give you. So that's probably going to be pretty soon. But August 4th, we're going to do properly growing mangoes. August 18th, we're going to do propagation by seed. And September 1st, we're going to do propagation by cuttings. We've already done propagation by air layers, propagation by grafting, and proper pruning. I do have an article in this new edition of Edible South Florida, which is on pruning. So you can check that out. It should be online soon as well. But just came out, and the title is The Case for Florida Avocados. So I think that's something you should check out. So let's go ahead and keep going. And also, if you're not on my email list and you want to be, please email me. I have 2 emails. One is Wasielewski@ufl.edu, easy to write and remember. The other one is sflhort@ufl.edu. SFL stands for South Florida Horticulture. So sflhort@ufl.edu. Okay, before we get into the information, where can you get information? A very good spot is called IFAS. That's the University of Florida database. And you can't get a publication there unless it's peer reviewed. So I can write something, I can put it on the web as a fact sheet. Only 1 or 2 other people has to look at it just for grammar or something like that. But for IFAS, it goes through very rigorous peer review. So it's very good information. So if you want to look at, let's say, if you want to learn about mangoes, you could type in EDIS space UF for University of Florida, space mango. They have a good publication on longans, on lychee, avocado, mamey, very many tropical fruit. And these publications are very in-depth. They really give you a lot of information. I encourage you to check them out. The one here on the screen is one I wrote, Tropical and Subtropical Fruit Propagation. So everything I talked about in air layering and grafting would be in this document. So you can read about it if you prefer to read. Another good place to get information is other universities. If UF doesn't have something, you can try Googling the subject that you want and then space and then EDU. EDU is for education and it's for universities. So if you put in breadfruit space EDU, you'll find things written by the University of Hawaii that University of Florida doesn't have. So that's another good way to get good, clean, good information. YouTube, if you prefer seeing things visually, I have a number of videos there. There's good videos from many people there. I recommend that you watch more than 1 video on the subject so you get a good overview. And do be careful. We do most of us live in South Florida, so the rules are different here. So a lot of the information is from other places, so just be careful about that. But you can learn a lot there. It's very easy to learn because it's visual. You can also learn from master gardeners. I know some of you, like Miss Pat Gill, that are watching are master gardeners, so they have a wealth of information. The number 1 place you can learn things is in your own grove or your own garden. If you see something happen there, you know it works. If you see something fail there, you know it's going to fail. You don't have to read about it. I encourage you to walk your own garden or your grove every day to see what's going on. That's how you're going to learn a lot. And finally, beware the source of your information. Just because you read it on the internet does not mean it's true. You have to look at everything with a grain of salt. It's very easy to put information on the internet. I could very easily right now put up a bunch of false things and make it look as though it was good information. I'm of course not going to do that, but that is out there. So just be careful. Okay. Now we're going to do a quick little easy pre-test. So let me launch this. If you would answer this, the questions is important factors to remember when planting are A, green side up, B, protect your plants, C, watch for binding of tape or tags, D, use herbicide to keep weeds away, E is A, B, and C, F is A, C, and D, G is A, B, C, and D, which is all of the above. One of my favorites. Okay, so far we have 3 people that have answered, 5 people, 7, a lot of good answers. A lot of people are getting it correct. We'll just hold on for a little while. Let me grab some water while you're doing this. Okay, so we'll end the poll and let me share the results. You should be able to see this. So important factors, 1 person said green side up, 1 person said protect your plants, 22 people got the answer correct, which is A, B, and C. Green side up, I think we know that one. Protect your plants, watch for binding of tape or tags. The tricky one was use herbicide to keep weeds away. I'm going to try to say not to do that. That's certainly a practice that is done. It works, but for the young plants, a tip and a trick is don't herbicide near those plants because it's very easy to get a little drift and hurt your plants. 1 person said A, C, and D, and 7 people fell for my old all of the above trick. So that's usually the answer, but it's not today. Okay, good job, guys. You'll see that test again at the end. So first thing I want you to know, we're going to talk about everything that goes with planting. First, I have a question. I've tried to grow sugar apple from seed, but the seeds do not sprout easily. What's the most productive way of propagating sugar apples? Caesar, the answer is from seed. We'll have a class on growing propagation from seeds, but today we're talking about planting and tips and tricks. Caesar, if you want to email me that question, I'll answer it better, but let's try to stay on topic. Okay, so you want your plants to be properly propagated. I've talked about this in other classes. What that means is, for the most part, you're not going to grow from seed. I just said sugar apple, you do it from seed. Papaya, usually you do it from seed. For the most part, though, you're going to use grafting or air layering or cuttings, because that is called asexual propagation. And the reason you do that is because if you plant a seed, like we see here on the right, if you plant a mango seed, that's a mango seed. If you plant that and you took it from a cherry mango tree, it's not going to be a cherry. The mother is a cherry, but whatever pollinated it is the father. So this is a combination of cherry and whatever was near it at the time. So you're not going to get exactly what you want. If we look at the left here, we see a cleft graft. The bottom, we have a healthy rootstock, excuse me, and the top we have, this would be a piece of a cherry mango. So these two will grow together, and this will be a clone of the cherry mango. So properly propagated is very important. Caesar, if you would look into the chat, Dr. Green has an answer for you, which is very nice of you. Thank you, Dr. Green. So Here we have a young tree on the left, a seedling. This could take 10 to 15 years before it finally flowers and fruits because it has to go through all the stages of sexual maturity. On the right, we have a very young tree, probably a year and a half old. It's already flowering. That's because the piece we took to graft it and put it together on a good rootstock, a seedling, the top part, the carry part, that is already sexually mature. So you see it's already starting to flower or trying to flower. Something this small, I wouldn't let it hold fruit, but this is just to illustrate that they can fruit very young. Typically, you're going to get fruit about 2 to 3 years. That's when the tree is big enough. Okay, so humans, not the same. The progeny being not the same is very good. That's a good thing. For plants, not the same, not so good. For fruit trees, if you have oak trees in a forest, that sexual difference of all the variation, the diversity is excellent in a forest. But if you're growing a fruit tree and you really want that Kerry mango or that Edward mango or that Monroe avocado or that Arkin carambola, you have to grow it asexually. So make sure when you purchase your plants that they have names on them. They're not just a carambola, they're an Arkin carambola. They're not just a mango, they're a Hayden mango. That's the point of what I'm trying to get across to you here. Gladiola says, in my house, I find several mango trees that have borne as in the wild. Some are big enough with fruit. Is the fruit still good? So Gladiola has seedling mangoes that are already giving fruit. The fruit might be, it's certainly good enough to eat, and it might be great. That's how we get, a lot of our mango cultivars is from selecting them from seed. But they might be dogs too. They might be full of fiber and just not good tasting. My advice to you is go ahead and eat them and see how they are. If they're great and they're from seed, you can name them the Gladiola, and that will be the name of that mango. Thank you, Dr. Green. Same answer. And Dr. Green, you had a question that you emailed me, so I'm going to answer that a little bit later. I haven't forgotten about it. Okay. Now, you've picked your plant, what you want to plant. You have the right cultivar for your grove or for your home or garden. Now, very important when you pick the space for it to grow, that you take into account how big that tree is going to get. If you're not going to prune it, lychee trees, mango trees, sapodilla trees, avocado trees, they can get to be 50 feet by 50 feet. So obviously you're going to want to prune that. So take a look at the webinar I did on that. And if you guys don't have the link for that, I just email me the question. I'll give you the link. I am going to put those on YouTube eventually, so they'll be there for you to find. So what we're looking at here is a grove, and you see everything's spaced out nicely. Everything's going to get sun. As these trees get bigger, they'll prune them. Everything will get sun. So it's very important that you pick a place that gets good sun. You don't want to plant on the north side of something very large, like a house or a bigger tree, because that north side of anything is going to be in shade all year. And for fruit trees, you want full sun as much as you can get, because they need that energy to make the flowers, to make the fruit. So very important. Dr. Green is killing it in the chat. He's like a little helper there. Thank you, Dr. Green. Okay, so we have the proper plant that we want. We've picked. We know we need full sun. Now we need to think about our soil. For the most part, we have 2 different types of soil. There's really more than that. But if you look at this map on the left, this is US 1 right there. Here's Homestead. Here's Florida City right there. Everglades is over here. So by US 1, you can kind of tell where you are. Okay, and 27 here, that's Chrome. right there. Okay, so the green says it's called rocky land. We'll talk about that next. That's limestone. This color, the yellowish mustard color here, that's marl. Marl is limestone that has been worn away over time by water. You see all these little finger glades here. This is where water would have gone in the past before all the canals were there. So marl is like a clay. Here you look at marl on the picture there with my foot. It's like a clay. It holds a lot of water, but when it gets dry, it gets very dry. So it's not the best for our tropical fruit. You may be over here east of US 1, and you may be in marl. A lot of these areas are nurseries, field nurseries, where they can easily plant things and dig them out because of the marl. What you don't see is a lot of fruit groves over here because the marl is not great for fruit growth. Now you could be over here in one of these little finger glades. And how do you know? You dig a hole. If you hit limestone, then you know you're up in a little higher area, you're in the rocky land. If you hit this marl and you want to put in a grove or you want to put in your fruit tree, I recommend that you plant it up on a mound because you don't want the feet wet, you don't want the roots wet for a long time, and that's what the marl will do. These are lower areas. You don't think of elevation when you think of South Florida, but definitely we do have some very slight elevation. And just an elevation of 1 to 2 feet can cause your plants to have an issue. Jorge is talking about pine rockland. Rockland, that's what we'll be talking about next. Anna asked, what about Naples area? Anna, you have a lot of sand over there, so you're in pretty good shape. Gladiola asks, I live by 200 and 132. Is it a good spot for soil? You'd have to let me come over there and dig a hole, Gladiola, so we'll see. Or you can do it yourself. Caesar asks, is the rockland the reason yucca is not grown that much in Miami-Dade County? Yes, our rock is not great. So here's limestone right here. And you can see it's porous, but it's very hard and it's also high in pH. So to dig a hole through that is going to be difficult. And also the high pH limits some of the things you can grow there. We can't grow hibiscus and ixoras and rhododendrons that well because of the high pH. And we'll have a class on fertilizer at another time, and I'll get more into pH there. So here's limestone. Here's my truck, and I actually had to drive up. You can see there's an elevation there of about 2 feet to get into this fruit grove. And they had mangoes there. They were all doing quite well. So you can definitely grow your fruit trees in this, in the oolitic limestone. And it's not a problem. The problem is actually digging through the limestone. So here is that cutaway. You can see it's very solid. You can imagine if you tried to dig a hole here with a pickaxe, it would be almost impossible. So my advice to you, if you hit a spot like this, shift a little bit and you might find a little solution hole where you can dig. If you're putting in an entire grove, I recommend using either an auger or a backhoe. Certainly you're not going to dig that all by hand. And remember, it is limestone, it's not coral. A lot of people think it's coral rock. Coral rock is found down in the Keys, Upper Keys, and then we skip it down again to limestone a little bit further down. And this limestone, this oolitic limestone, is only found here and in the Bahamas. Nowhere else in the world do we have this exact same soil profile. Okay, so how to dig. On the right, we're looking at some marl. Very easy to dig there. Again, you're not going to want to have your fruit trees in that unless you have a mound. And gladiola, you can see the difference between the rocks on the left and the marl on the right. So if you were to just dig a foot down, you would be able to tell if you have marl or not. And remember, if you have marl, it's not the end of the world. You just want to grow on a mound or plant on a mound rather than straight into the soil. And to the left, we see a hole that was dug with an auger, and we can see it's sort of a mix of pretty good soil and then some rock. It has that little red tinge to it, so we know this was dug in the Redland. This was actually done over at Trek, and that red tinge comes from iron in the soil. The iron, unfortunately, is not available to your plants, but that's where that red tinge comes from. Maria says, how do you tell the difference between limestone and coral? I'm in Redland. I thought I saw coral. There may be some pockets of coral here and there. I'm not exactly sure how to tell the difference between the two, but I can look into that for you, Maria. I do have your contact information, but I know for the most part, South Florida is limestone. There's certainly little areas where coral may have popped up. Okay, so here's some holes that were dug by a backhoe. If you look on the right, these are all holes. Unfortunately, I got to this grower after he dug these holes. He dug the holes a little too big. If you look at the hole on the left, he actually dug, oh, he didn't dig them too big, he dug them too deep. He went all the way down to the water. So that's too deep, because now when he plants in that, he's going to be into the water. Now this water was pretty high. You can see this hole is only about 2 feet deep and the water was that high. But he was in a low-lying area. Okay. So when you dig your hole, if you're doing it by hand, obviously you can't dig it this wide. It's good. It's okay to dig it wider than the container. Usually I dig it just a little bit wider than the container and a little bit deeper. And that's how deep and wide I dig the hole. Usually I'm digging my holes by hand. If you do have access to a backhoe or you hire a backhoe, it's good to go a little wider. That way the roots have a little more space. The roots will get on top of this limestone and they will find their way into the limestone as well. Okay, so you dig your hole, and like I said, you dig it a little bit wider than the container, you dig it a little bit deeper, and this is a tool I typically use when I'm digging by hand. It's called a pickaxe, and I dig with this back part here. If I have really hard limestone, I'll hit it with the pick part, and but I typically use this. I don't even use a shovel at all. I dig with this. If you're in an area where you're lucky enough to be able to dig holes with a shovel, that's amazing. But down in South Florida, we're unable to do that. So here you see, I say dig and check the roots. So we've talked about the location. We've talked about choosing your plant. When you choose your plant, you also want to choose something that's disease-free. And that's going to bring me to Dr. Green's question, which I'll read. He emailed me this. How do you vet potential nurseries to find plants that are disease-free, don't have root binding, they're the correct variety, they should be, and they're grown on suitable rootstock? Unfortunately, as an educator for University of Florida, I'm not allowed to pick and choose what nurseries I tell you to go to. I do have a list of all the nurseries, but to answer your question, Dr. Green, I would go to these nurseries. And when you see the plants in the nursery, you'll be able to tell if they're healthy, number one. You can tell if they're root bound, which we'll talk about in a minute. Being root bound means that the plant is underpotted. It's been in a container too long and the roots are circling in the container. If you see a container, let's say a 3-gallon, which would be about this wide by that tall. If you see a plant in there and the stem is bigger than, let's say, 1/2 or 3/4 of an inch, it's very large, then you can guess that that plant is definitely root bound. Some nurseries will let you actually pull the plant out of the container to see if the roots are wrapping around. But my advice to you is go to see the nursery. get word of mouth of who's good, who's not. Unfortunately, the question of if it's the right variety on the right rootstock, you just have to go to the nurseries with word of mouth that are better. For the most part, most nurseries are very good about their variety being on the right rootstock and being the correct variety. But let's imagine for a minute that you bought a Cary mango and that's what you wanted, but they had it mislabeled. It's really a Valencia Pride. And you really wanted that Cary, and now it finally grows and it's big and it's long and it's red. And it's definitely not a Cary mango because those are yellow. So that's what Dr. Green is getting at, where you want to have, make sure you know what you're getting is exactly what you want it to be. And for the most part, I would say all the nurseries are doing a good job of that. All the nurseries on my list are doing a good job of that. And I would definitely say talk to other people and find out what the best nurseries are. And if you talk to me, I might be able to hint at what's best, but I'm certainly not going to do that at the moment. Okay, so if you, now that you've looked at your plants, you've taken them out of the pot, you see that they're not root bound, and we'll talk about root binding again in a little bit. You want to make sure that you plant them at the right level. These particular mango grove here, they planted everything too deep, so they killed most of their plants. And if you look here, you can also see weed whacker damage as well. So they planted too deep, and then they let the weeds get up to the tree, and then they weed whacked it as well. Danielle asked, I've seen plants with orange through their leaves. Are these healthy plants? I'm not sure what you mean by that, Danielle. If you mean little dots of orange, that's probably okay. It probably just needs a little more fertilizer. If the entire plant, if the entire leaf is orange and it's supposed to be green, that's probably not good. Remember though, some young fruit trees, or some fruit trees, when they flush, their leaves, that means when they come out with new leaves, the leaves are a different color at first. So wait till those leaves harden off until they get thicker, then you'll be able to see their true color. Okay, the planting steps, we'll go over them. You look at the picture on the left. This is, you have an area you're going to plant. First thing you want to do is remove all the grass from that area in a circle about 2 feet by 2 feet, which you see here in the second picture, right there. Okay, so I removed all the grass. I've already taken the plant out of the container. I looked at the roots, they're in good shape. This is a lychee that's going into the ground. This is actually a demonstration I did at the Fruit and Spice Park. And you see all the grass, I actually put it into the container right there. So that way it's not all over the place. You don't have to do that though. And then if you look on the right, I am putting the tree into the ground. If the soil seems like it's going to fall apart, be very careful when you put it into the ground. If the roots are circling, if you see a big root and it's going in a circle around the container, go ahead and cut that. It's not the end of the world if you have that, but go ahead and cut that. That way, just like if you cut a branch, it's going to spread out from that spot. Okay, now when you put it in the ground, very important that you put it at the right level. You get one chance to do this. If you put it too deep, it's much worse than if you put it too high. So what are we looking at in the level? Typically in the nursery here, if you look at this middle picture, typically in the nursery, they have it at the right level. So if you put that soil level with the same soil level in the ground, and I put it about a ½ an inch to 3/4 of an inch higher, that way if it settles a little bit, it'll still be at a good level. But if you go to the trunk of the tree and pull the soil away just a little bit, what you're looking for is that first lateral root called a flare root. Sometimes you can see it in the container, But that lateral root, that flare root, is the level you want to plant at. And I'll show you a picture of that in a second. Okay, so we put it in the ground, we found the flare root, we've got it at the right level. And if you notice the soil here, when I dug the hole, I kept everything close to, I kept everything close to the hole. When you dig the hole, it's sometimes you want to dig and you want to shoot the soil out too far. Like here, I put it a little too far. We want to keep that soil close to the hole because we're going to put that native soil right back into the hole. And if we get it all out in the grass like that, it's going to be very hard to collect it. Okay. Now, if you notice, if you look at this hole that I've dug, there's not much limestone there, and that's no accident that I picked that spot. I've done this demonstration for a couple years in a row, and I'm secretly using the exact same spot when I dig. Okay, so here we go. I put it at the right level, and if you look at the root ball, I've kind of tickled these roots a little bit. So it doesn't stay in this shape like this. I tickled these roots a little bit. I kind of made them a little scraggly, if you will. And when I did that, I kept that good soil from the container in the hole. And you see there's some of the good soil. I'm going to put that back. That soil in the container usually has slow release fertilizer. So make sure you get all of that back into the hole. Then I'm going to backfill with this native soil here. I'm not going to purchase soil to put in there. I'm not going to add soil. I'm going to use the native soil because we want these trees to go right back out, the roots to go right back out into the native soil. Okay, and then I'm putting mulch around the tree, or I'm keeping the area clean of weeds. Then I'm going to water. It's very important that you water immediately. That gets the air pockets out. You don't want to have any air pockets. I have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to speed up just a bit. So here's the circling roots that we're talking about. I believe this picture on the left may be from Dr. Green. I'm not sure. I think he may have taken it. But you see this plant, this mango that passed away, it was in a 3-gallon container for too long. And you see the roots are circling around. You see right here, it's a big circling root. So that's one of the things that probably killed it. If you look on the right, this plant looks like it was in a quart size for a little too long, or even in the liner, because here you see the big root and then it turns. But all in all, this one's not in that bad a shape because the bigger roots do get out of there. But if I were to take this out of a container and I saw that big root on the side, I would cut it. Sam is asking, for fruit trees that like soil on the acidic side, is there any value in adding peat moss or compost to the planting hole? So remember with the limestone, I said it's high in pH. Sam is talking about plants that prefer low pH. I don't think, Sam, by just adding peat, you're going to really be able to change the pH. You might change it initially for a tiny bit, but over time, it's not going to work. So you might try to grow that in a container rather than in the ground to keep the pH a little bit lower. Or you're going to need a massive hole and backfill that. But I don't think that would work. What you can do is use the right kind of fertilizer. That will help a little bit. Okay, so plant at the proper depth. We'll talk about this one last time. Here's a tree. I pull away the soil, and here's our flare root. So this is at a good level right here. What was up here was just a little mulch. So this is at a good level. So proper depth, you see on the left, here's a tree that looked like it was at the right level. You do see a little root binding down at the bottom when it was in the 3-gallon. And you look on the right, here's a grove I went to just last week. And I dug down and I dug down and I dug down and I never found a flare root. So that you see, I put my pruners in the hole. It was so deep to show you how deep it is. So this was a tree that was suffering a little bit, and it was just planted too deep. And actually, they had mounded soil up around the plant. So the solution here would be just pull back all that soil. It wasn't actually planted too deep. There was soil mounded around it. But if you do have a tree that's planted this deep, there's not much you can do once it's rooted. The key that I want you to know is when you put it in the ground, put it at the right level. Okay, now if you look at this same picture, you see this tree tape, we can see a little binding here. This bamboo is holding the tree up, but the tree tape is too tight. So this tree has actually grown so much that it shouldn't even have this bamboo on here. So this needs to be cut off, because if you look at our next picture, here's the same tree on the right, and you see it's dug in and bound that. If you look on the left, you see someone labeled this hog plum or ciruela and jocote, and they used metal binding and it bit into the tree. So be careful, loosen your binding. Now, the other thing you need to worry about is weed whackers. That's why I put mulch around my trees, or I keep the soil away from the tree. Here's a tree that's been weed whacked. On the right, you see mulch, you see a tree guard. It still got weed whacked. That's here in my grove. It wasn't me that weed whacked it, but the crew, they get a little crazy. Why do you want to protect your tree? Okay, your dicots are going to look like this when you cut them open. In the middle is the xylem. In the xylem, things go up the tree. Water and nutrients go up the tree. On the outside, sorry about that, on the outside you have the phloem, right here, this. Things go down. The nutrients or the food that the tree makes for itself during photosynthesis goes down to the roots. If you cut that, you're cutting off the tree's ability to feed itself. So that is why you don't want to have your trees girdled or weed whacked. So what do? I put a lot of mulch, like a donut, or this is in my home on the right, I use just some rock to put it around, and I keep the weeds away from the tree. You don't need the mulch. What you do need, and the mulch is very it takes a lot of time, and it's hard to get a lot of mulch. It could be expensive, and over time, the weeds will still grow into it. So one thing you can do that's a lot cheaper is just put a little border around it and just pull the weeds. As long as you keep those weeds pulled away, no one's gonna try to get in there to weed whack. So here's a tree that I pulled out of the ground. It was dead, so I laid it down on the ground. We're looking at it from above. This is an avocado that was dead. And you see, if we look here, it was planted at the right level. There's our flare root, so that wasn't the problem. We can obviously see what the problem is here. It was weed whacked many times, and that girdled the tree, cutting off the phloem and cutting off the tree's own food supply. Okay, so here's a picture of my tropical fruit learning grove when my trees were a little younger. And you see, when I was a younger man, I was able to put a lot of mulch around there. I'm still waiting for Sam to help me with that, but he hasn't really done that, so we'll see. He mulched like one tree. So just joking with you, Sam. So that's one thing I do, but I will be honest. The weeds get in there, the mulch decomposes, and my trees still get weed whacked. It's okay under the bus there, Sam. I'm there too sometimes. So what I really need to do is just keep the weeds away from my trees. That way they won't get weed whacked. The take-home message is keep everything away, or the grass or the weeds away from your trunks so they don't get damaged. Okay, and then finally, one of the last things I'll tell you is think about watering your trees. Remember I said you water them after you plant them, but a good time to plant is now in the rainy season. We have really two seasons in South Florida, and one is May through October, which is the rainy season where we get about 43 inches on average. And then you have the dry season, which begins about November to April. We get about 14 inches. So if you plant in the rainy season, which is now, you'll get a lot of help from Mother Nature. It's very warm, it's very humid, you're getting a lot of rain. That helps your things, your plants to get in the ground and really get their roots out and get going. Now, if we get a little dry spell, aftercare is very crucial. If you look at the tree on the left, this is in my grove. This is a avocado that, Sam, I'll take you out from under the bus. Sam did help me water this when I was on a business trip. So tree looks great because we watered it, but we didn't water it every single day. That's too much. If the tree is dry, you water it. If the tree is moist, you don't. How do you know? You take your finger and you put it down and you check. One thing you can do is have a little plastic rain gauge so you know how much rain you get. If you get a ½ inch, 3/4 of an inch, or an inch, that's enough. If you get just 1/10 of an inch, you're probably going to need to water if you check the soil and it's dry. And here you see a tree on the right of a grove I visited. The grass had grown up to it. It had been weed whacked and weed whacked and weed whacked and weed whacked over time. So it was in poor shape. Okay, now we're going to take a post test, which will look very similar to our last test. Let's all try to get 100% here, ladies and gentlemen. Important factors to remember when planting are green side up, protect your plants, watch for binding or tape or tags, use herbicide to keep weeds away. Answers A, B, and C. F is answers A, C, and D. And G, the classic, all of the above, A, B, C, and D. Okay, so far we have 25 people that have answered. 100% is correct so far. Don't be that person that gets it wrong and ruins the poll here. Take a picture of that. Okay, I'm going to, oh, sorry about that. I'm going to end the poll and share results. And what a class. They say teaching the test doesn't work, but now we know that it does. Good job, everybody. Dr. J, who's a professor at FIU, is probably thinking, wow, this guy is kind of cheating here on the test. Yes, I am, Dr. J. I taught at Miami-Dade and I taught at public school, and I was a very easy grader. I wanted you to pass, so, but I didn't teach a test like this, to be honest. Okay, so just one more plug for Tropical Fruit Tuesdays. I hope to see you August 4th for Properly Growing Mangoes. Unfortunately, today I really had a little more that I wanted to tell you. I thought I could do it in 45 minutes, but there was I talked a little too much in certain sections, I suppose. Propagation by seed is August 18th, and propagation by cuttings is September 1st. Maria says, thank you. Julieta says, thank you. Caesar says, I wish you could do longer sessions. Caesar, when we get back to doing face-to-face, usually I do 2 hours, so that will be better. Michelle, thank you, thank you. A lot of thank yous. I want to thank Jorge. I saw he was answering some questions. I want to definitely thank Dr. Green, answered a lot of questions. So thank you guys so much. And Sarah, Charlotte County, thank you, Sarah, for tuning in. Thanks, everybody. Caesar, I saw you working on the Yucca questions there with Dr. Green. So Dr. Green, thank you for doing that. Okay, Carmen asked, is it possible to get the links for previous sessions? Yes. Anybody who wants that, just email me. I'll give them all to you. We have air layering, grafting, and proper pruning. I have them in a little Word document, so I can just copy, paste, and send you everything. Okay? Thank you guys so much. And I'm going to go ahead and end it here. Thank you guys so much for your time. There's my email. If you're not on my email list, please ask to get on it if you want to. If you are on my email list and you want to get off, just ask as well. I'll be happy to do that. Okay, Larry, thanks for tuning in from Sarasota. Caesar, I'm glad you do. Bill Jones had a great little picture of himself as a skeleton, so thanks for coming, Bill. And Lucas, you're quite welcome. Okay, everybody. So thank you. It was good to see everybody. Ralph, good to see you. Good to see you, Dr. J. Good to see you, everybody. Thank you so much. I'll see you again in 2 weeks, hopefully. Okay. Thank you, guys. Have a good and safe rest of your day.